Hey folks, welcome back to Tech and More Tech. I'm Carlo, and in this video, I'm going to go over the top 5 mistakes to avoid when building out a smart home. As always, if you prefer a written version, head on over to techandmoretech.com or check the link in the description below. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I post smart home videos every weekend, so if that sounds like something you may be interested in, please consider subscribing so you don't miss out. If you've seen my videos before and you've liked them or found them useful, be sure to hit the like button to help out with the YouTube algorithm. Okay, on to the content. I've been a smart home user for about 4 years now, and I've pretty much gone through every phase and made all the mistakes there are to make. So I'm going to share with you the top 5 mistakes to avoid when you start out with smart home tech. These are in no particular order, but some are related to one another. The first mistake to avoid is buying any product based on features that it does not ship with. Companies make plenty of promises in regards to features or compatibility that say will come in a future update, and that they're working very hard to get to you. It's not that they're lying to swindle you out of your money into buying their product. I don't think these companies are necessarily nefarious, but too often they just overpromise and can't deliver. The most notable example of this was when Ring, the company that makes smart doorbells, said they would have HomeKit support. They initially said that they would have HomeKit support with iOS 10 back in 2016. It's been 5 years since then, and anyone still patiently holding their breath has turned blue and died a long time ago. At this point, it's just a running joke within the smart home community and serves as a lesson to all future smart home customers. If a company says they are working on a feature that is valuable to you and even seems like a really easy thing for them to implement, just wait for them to actually implement it. If it's just a bonus feature you don't care too much about, then that's your prerogative. But in general, you're better off waiting or just buying a different product altogether. Sometimes there may not be another product, like the Ring example, but at least then you're not buying something with the false hope of getting a big feature down the line. And to any product manufacturers out there that may be watching, always under-promise, over-deliver, not the other way around. I wasn't even affected by the Ring situation, and I'm still salty about it. Anyways, on to mistake number 2. The second mistake to avoid is buying incompatible devices. Within the smart home world, you've got 3 to 5 major ecosystems depending on how you want to count them. The big 3 voice platforms are Google Home, Amazon Alexa, and Apple HomeKit. Most smart home manufacturers will try and achieve compatibility with one or multiple of these platforms. Amazon and Google have the largest amount of compatible devices, meanwhile HomeKit has the least amount. The other 2 ecosystems are Samsung SmartThings and Home Assistant. SmartThings is pretty good because of its wide compatibility and because it has a built-in Zigbee and Z-Wave hub, which offers even more device compatibility beyond the capabilities of Google or Amazon. It can also be further integrated into Amazon or Google, but still has a very strong automation platform of its own, so unless you really need the voice assistant capabilities, SmartThing is up there with the rest of them, and it's very sort of self-sufficient. Companies will also commonly specify that they are compatible with SmartThings, giving it even more sort of status. The 5th ecosystem that I consider up there with the other ones is Home Assistant. It's an open source DIY platform for those of us that hate ourselves and want fine control over everything. It's much less of a polished platform than the others, but it definitely has its benefits. Now, as far as the mistakes to avoid, which is buying incompatible devices, I strongly advocate for buying devices that are ecosystem agnostic, or at least as much as possible. Meaning they are compatible with as many different ecosystems as they can be. There are a couple reasons for this. Firstly, the point of a smart home is that it makes your life a little bit easier, and if your devices can't communicate with each other, then you won't be able to create various scenes or automations, and you'll be confined to controlling some devices in one app and some devices in another app. And it will just generally be a terrible experience. Secondly, if you decide you don't like how a particular platform is working anymore, you don't then need to go out and buy a whole new set of devices to make your smart home work on a different platform. Let's say hypothetically you want to build out a smart home using the Amazon ecosystem. Perfectly reasonable. But then one day, Jeff Bezos tweets out about how he loves messing with people's smart lights just for fun. This doesn't actually happen, but it's just a wacky scenario. This kind of news upsets you, rightfully so, and you decide you don't want to use Amazon's smart home devices anymore. You want to switch to HomeKit, which has better privacy policies. That is actually true. Well, if your devices were only compatible with Amazon, you will now have to go out and replace all of those Amazon-compatible devices with HomeKit-compatible devices. Meanwhile, if you bought devices that were compatible with all three ecosystems, like let's say Hue lights or Lutron dimmers, you could then just deactivate your Amazon Echo accounts and devices and only use those same products with your iPhone and HomeKit. I definitely realize that this may limit the number of options you have, especially if you're after that HomeKit compatibility. But unless you 100% know you'll never have an iPhone, then it's worth the extra little bit of money and effort to find it to get that wider compatibility. One big example I refer to is the Nest vs Ecobee thermostats. If you have an iPhone, I cannot recommend the Nest thermostat, and honestly I just prefer the Ecobee one anyways, as I think it's a better product. But because the Nest is not HomeKit compatible and most likely never will be, you will never be able to use Siri on your phone to change the temperature of your thermostat, and that's a luxury worth having. Before we go on to mistake number 3, I'd like to know what some of your smart home mistakes have been. Drop a comment down below because I'm very curious. On to the next one. The third mistake to avoid when building a smart home is to avoid cheap items. This may come off as a surprise, but often cheap devices aren't very well made. I know. I couldn't believe it either when I found out. Obviously this may come off as condescending, but it's not. It's just, fun. And that's not the intention. Really what I mean is don't buy the cheapest device just to have it. The amount of super cheap Wi-Fi smart lights on Amazon is staggering, and they are mostly crap. Chances are they have terrible Wi-Fi chips in them with poor reliability, and who knows what kind of servers they may be pinging with various data. Also, their color accuracy and brightness is also bad. You're much better off spending a little bit more and getting a well-reviewed and regarded product from a reputable brand which will provide you a more reliable and consistent experience. I'm not saying you have to buy the most expensive stuff out there, as oftentimes certain products, Hue, are a bit overpriced and have excellent competitors at a lower price point. I've bought plenty of cheap devices in the early years only to have them fail within a year and then go straight into the trash. You get what you pay for, and it's worth paying a bit more for better stuff. Mistake number 4 to avoid is forgetting about your network. I have a video linked below from last year when I talked about whether or not you need a smart home hub or if you can just have Wi-Fi devices. Link down below. When you're first starting out with smart homes, you understandably don't want to invest $100 into a hub that you don't fully understand the purpose of and if you actually really need it or not. So you inevitably buy Wi-Fi based devices because you'll know they work with your router and with your home in general. And for most people, this is a perfectly acceptable route to take. If you don't have too many devices, they'll all just work fine. But there are 2 things to take into consideration when taking this approach. First is performance of your network, and the second is security. The vast majority of people tend to use the router modem combo that their ISP provides. For the most part, this device is pure garbage and has no business existing in your smart home, or home in general. But let's assume you keep using it anyways. As you accumulate more and more smart home devices, especially that are Wi-Fi, they can start to affect the performance and reliability of your whole Wi-Fi network. The reason is because they will all be communicating some small amount of information periodically, and as the number of devices increases, so does the amount of communication between the device and your router. So now when you are browsing YouTube for the newest smart home video, that request is sent to the router, but now has to wait in this long line behind 30 other requests from various smart home devices that you have. Newer routers have features such as MU-MIMO, which stands for Multi-User Multiple Input Multiple Output, which basically means that it can separate requests into different lines so your important web browsing isn't slowed down by your various smart home devices. The even better option is to not have that many Wi-Fi smart home devices in the first place. and use devices that use something like Zigbee, Z-Wave, or Thread, which are completely separate networks altogether and have no effect on your Wi-Fi. Again, link in the description below for a whole dedicated video on that topic if you're interested. The second mistake with your network is to neglect the security. It's typically good practice to keep your personal devices, like your phones and your computers, on a separate network to your smart home devices. In the event that they are compromised, they won't then have access to the rest of your network. It's another advantage of the Zigbee, Z-Wave, Thread devices because it's a separate network. HomeKit has a big benefit in this aspect because all HomeKit devices must be able to work locally only. Meaning, even if they are Wi-Fi devices, they don't need outside internet communication and can solely exist within HomeKit. Don't skimp out on security and your network health in general. If you're going to go Wi-Fi, at least have a good modern router. Some routers will have dedicated Internet of Things permissions, and some even have HomeKit support, which allows you to decide how much access your smart home has on a per-device basis. Don't make the mistake of buying too many Wi-Fi devices and then wondering why Netflix is taking forever to load while you've got 30 smart lights connected to your internet service provider's Wi-Fi router. And lastly, the fifth and last mistake to avoid is don't buy things you don't need. This may seem like an obvious one, but honestly, it's kind of like a reality check every once in a while. I, just like many of you, love tech and gadgets, as you can see. So I often want something just for the sake of getting a new tech toy. I'm happy with it for the first couple of days, and then it gets relegated into the closet of doom where it is never to be seen again. And this is mainly because I never needed it in the first place. I'm all for goofy toys every once in a while, but I think it's worth taking some time before buying anything and planning out what you would like in your smart home. The most obvious answers are a smart thermostat and some smart lighting. Don't get enamored by a fancy new device and then think of a problem for it to solve. Find problems first and then see if there's a smart home solution to it. This will reduce the amount of money you spend, which is obviously great. It also reduces e-waste as those unwanted devices inevitably end up in a landfill somewhere. So there you have it, 5 mistakes to avoid when building a smart home. Hopefully all of these made sense to you, and my experience making these mistakes will help you avoid them. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, be sure to like and subscribe button for plenty more videos to come. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below and I'll get to them as best I can. And until next time, see ya.